Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about cybersecurity and Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security. Start talking about priorities. And Freddie, let me throw it over to you. You talked about some stuff that you were doing already. Give us your top two priorities for this year in regards to cybersecurity.
With cybersecurity on the unclassed network with Office 365, we're currently at impact level 2. Our goal is to get to impact level 5, so we can allow folks to do sensitive work that's on the network while they're at home. The other thing we're going to embark on, another major initiative for us, is to revamp and revitalize the asset management program. Naturally, we have thousands of assets scattered across the globe, and we're finding, hey, we're having a difficult time tracking everything that we own, because if you don't know what you own, you don't know how to defend it. So that's our major initiative for us this year, is aligning the right skilled folks on that team and using automated capabilities and get away from old methods and trying to track down your assets. That's a major initiative for us this year. And the last one is we have an inspection and oversight capability that we're standing up. And that's basically for the Joint Worldwide Intelligence and Communication System. Being the executive agent for JWICS, as they call it, we have to start inspecting and looking at where somebody mentioned all the endpoints around JWICS, and see how secure JWICS is, and work with all the IC partners, intelligence community partners, and working together with them and say, okay, how can we secure JWICS and make that cyber hygiene and raise that level up? And that's by doing an inspection program and compliance program, as well as inspecting ourselves. Naturally, DoD inspects, the unclassified network, the secret networks. But when it comes to the top secret SCI networks, that's DI's, area or territory. We have to do a better job of inspecting us and raising our level of security across those networks. Those are the three areas a couple areas that we're going to.
Fantastic. Always good to have a peer review and pressure test these environments, right? Makes a lot of sense. Martin, how about over at Verizon? What are the top two priorities for you folks that either inside of Verizon or perhaps what is being asked of Verizon?
Yeah, it's actually very similar, both internal to Verizon and certainly with our customers. The common denominator is that the digital transformation and technology modernization strategies drive our cybersecurity programming that's required for enablement. So a first example, our digital transformation journey continues to move additional workloads to the cloud. So this drives the cyber priority of implementing a cloud North Star security architecture built on that zero trust foundation that we've talked about today, with as much automation as possible built in for compliance monitoring and threat monitoring and data protection. Another example is 5G, which is a game changer for Verizon and our business customers. 5G is enabling breakthroughs today in connectivity, robotics, virtual and augmented reality, autonomous vehicles, wearables, and the Internet of Things. So a critical cyber priority for us is to continue to build security into the rollout of 5G and edge computing, so our customers can really capitalize on that full value proposition and deliver their missions in new and innovative ways that were literally unimaginable just a few short years ago. So as we continue to transform internally, and as our customers continue to transform, we're integrating our cyber priorities into those transformation plans. So I could tell you it's going to be a very exciting year.
Yeah, it seems that 5G like never before, as far as, incorporating security into it, baked into the technology, is definitely one, as opposed to the old bolt-on capability that we all were facing over the years. Ron, how about over at Army? You got a lot of things on the deck over there, it sounds like. Give us your top two priorities that you're really going to focus on this year.
Yeah, I would say similar on visibility that Freddie talked about. We are at, the Army's been pushing hard to migrate, legacy capabilities, apps and data to commercial cloud providers. But the Army has also accelerated the rollout of Office 365 in an impact level 5 environment. And we're driving to be there by June at least the initial capabilities, because that's when commercial virtual remote contract ends. So we want to make sure the Army users don't lose capabilities. So really that visibility, which is critical from our legacy environment, our commercial cloud providers, and then with the Office 365, because fundamentally you got to have visibility. That's a key part of security. And then I would say another real priority is improve our ability to detect and respond to malicious cyber activity. You know, we all strive to put our posture as best we can, but the reality is an adversary, if they work hard enough, it can get into anything. And so it's a matter of how you deal with it, the speed of which you respond, how you detect, how you work that. And with that, of course, is the ability, you know, we talked a little bit about the workforce, you know, continue to professionally train our military and civilian workforce to be able to support and focus on the missions, because it isn't, you know, cybersecurity, you don't do it for cybersecurity, you do it for the mission. And it's incredibly important. So that whole thing about our ability to detect and respond and have the workforce that's able to do that, along with our industry partner, our vendors that really assist us both in capability and in I'll say intellectual capital.
So critical, right? It's not as they say, it's not a matter of if you're going to get compromised, it's when. And it's all about, you know, protecting the blast zone, how are you going to respond to it, et cetera, and having that bolted down very tightly. Jim, how about at Fortinet? Well, what's your top two priorities that you all are looking at over there?
Well, Luke, I think the biggest priority is helping our federal partners and our private sector customers deal with what I'm characterizing as the year of the hybrid. And I don't mean cars. As I look at 2021, because I was an Intel analyst, and you always, at the beginning of the year, you have to make your forecast. We're going to be dealing with hybrid work patterns. We're already talking about what is the mix between remote and on-prem going to look like. We're looking at hybrid workers, robotic process automation accelerated dramatically, not only at the federal level, but other parts of government and the private sector over the past year. And it's one thing when it's in the public-facing chatbots, but it's increasingly being used in back office situations where we now have the intersection of IT and OT and thinking about how to secure that. And then the hybridization of threat itself, that you're now seeing things like ransomware with doxing as a secondary threat to incentivize the victim to pay, or AI-driven content for spear phishing, where the intruder not only steals your address book, they steal samples of your email. There's open source AI code out there that will allow you to customize the syntax to recognizing that you talk to your mom differently than your manager, and then Frankenstein code where they build it at a best of breed. So you look at this environment and you say, it's changing for everyone. So helping them with everything from continued training to deployment of SASE as you know, a technology. These are the kind of things we're trying to focus on for our customers.
Yeah, and as this environment changes, the response to how you're going to manage and operate and certainly secure the environment has to change at the same time, right? I mean, this is a very quick evolving operational apparatus, if you will, that's never ending and changing, and you got to stay on top of that, and that's really important to make sure that we have the right kind of technologies to address that. Hemant, you've got a lot of things going on over there at Homeland Security. Top two priorities that you all are focused on that you're going to double down on in 2021.
Thank you, Luke. Yes, there's definitely a lot going on. So, you know, from an IT initiative standpoint, Luke, as you're aware, previous CIO had mentioned this as well. And our acting CIO, Ms. Capello, has also touched on this, you know, about network modernization, data center optimization, and our enterprise infrastructure solutions as being the critical ones. Now, obviously, you know, cybersecurity is, you know, has to be and is integrated in all of these initiatives. But specifically on cybersecurity, I know we mentioned several others have talked about the enterprise visibility and the endpoint visibility. So, you know, we are, you know, full steam ahead with the CDM program, as you're aware. So this year, I mean, we'll continue to mature that program to really improve and expand this enterprise-wide visibility into the cybersecurity risk. So CDM maturity is key. And as far as you know, supply chain, especially now more than ever, supply chain risk management is really critical. So we are, working with multiple line of businesses within DHS to establish methodologies and standards for evaluating technology and services. So as part of the supply chain effort, we're working on development of standard contract language for future procurement, solicitations, and then hardware, software, service risk evaluations, both pre and then post procurement. That's important for us. We're also, working with DoD, partnering very heavily with them to evaluate the establishment of the cybersecurity maturity model certification, the CMMC processes within the department. And then we are also, as part of the same kind of line, we are looking at maturing our processes for static and dynamic code review and analysis. That's part of the supply chain framework. Lastly, Luke, I would add is we are I mentioned the partnership with CISA and their QSMO platform. That's really critical. We are looking forward to integrating the crowdsourced security testing to further harden security for external facing system. And then, by doing that, increasing the enterprise risk posture awareness for DHS.
Yeah, supply chain always are really critical, and these collateral systems always really critical. We saw that with the OPM breach. We're certainly seeing it again now. That's a really difficult environment to get a handle on, and certainly things like zero trust architecture seems to be one of the answers to that situation. Well, let's start talking about lessons learned. And Ron, I'm going to go up to you, and let's talk about, as you're getting into this, you're starting to, operate in a different kind of environment, you're accelerating, et cetera. What are the lessons learned that you'd like to share, pluses or minuses, that, would be certainly of interest to the listening audience?
The first one is, well, as we've already talked about, the COVID, and really has shown the absolute need and the ability to work in a distributed way. But what also came out of that is, the traditionally in the DoD, and I'll say especially in the Army, it was always government furnished equipment, laptops, phones, et cetera. But we've really seen with this, we must also non-government furnished equipment, the BYOD sort of bring your own device, and how we have to have an environment that supports that. And so I would say it tells us, help us drive towards what we're doing and moving to that, as all of us have talked about, that zero trust architecture environment with the least privilege access. So that's about the non-government furnished equipment. The other one I would say is, we've absolutely, over the last year, we are moving much faster to quarantine systems. We used to have kind of a big debate, what's the impact to mission, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if a system isn't configured right, if a system isn't patched right, it gets quarantined until the user fixes it. And so that is really a cultural thing across the Army, the recognition and support from leadership that says the weakest link brings vulnerability to everybody. And so if you don't have your stuff up to date, then if you have an impact on your mission, that's because you didn't do what you needed to do. And I would tell you, that's what we're doing much more rapidly than we ever have in the past.
Really shining some daylight on these situations as you're getting into a sort of a full discovery mode, if you will. Matt, let's jump over to you. I was so anxious to get to lessons learned because I know the audience really likes that. Forgot to highlight you on priorities for Illumio that you're seeing sort of internally, maybe what you're being asked of, and certainly right behind that, give us the lessons learned.
So I think I'm going to start with the second question and go backwards. So I think the biggest lesson learned is our adversaries are looking at what our focus is and then going for a weak spot, right? It's like if you're boxing somebody, you look for that opening and you go for that spot. Our adversaries just taught us a huge lesson, which is, we've been focusing on the user. And so they went behind the user, and we talked about the supply chain problem that we just hit, right? So I think the big lesson that we've learned is we need to learn to walk and chew gum at the same time. What does that mean? That means not just think about the end user, but also think about what the end user is connecting to and the supply chain problem, because they're really going after the stuff in the data center. OPM was about what was in the data center. Sunburst was about what was in the data center, because that's where Orion And so let me talk about, how would you sort of solve that problem? The answer is it starts off with that visibility. And Ron touched on that, and as did Hemant. However, let's really, the word visibility to me is sort of like saying blue. There's many different shades of blue. So let's talk about what I mean by that. There's device visibility, what's on my network, what's attaching to my network, and then what are those devices connecting to? There's going to be some amount of devices, and they're going to have to connect in. And then from an end user perspective, we're seeing stuff like zero trust network access to solve that problem. But that doesn't stop what's behind that access point, that proxy sitting in front of the data center. And Sunburst took advantage of the fact that we've really only focused on the perimeter. And what happens behind that perimeter is really the attacker's open domain. So their entire goal is to get behind that perimeter, to get to where the data is in the data center. So visibility to me means looking at what are the normal communication patterns and then stopping that which is abnormal. And once again, that's a mindset problem. So so in terms of priorities for this year for me, it's really, once again, turning back to education, really thinking about restricting lateral movement to only those connections which should be allowed, rather than sort of allowing, that internet mindset of, hey, once you're connected, you can go anywhere you want. We really focused on the end user in. We haven't really talked about how to solve that problem in mass inside the data center. What Ron talked about in terms of like an unpatched system, how to isolate it. Well, what if isolating it, how to isolate it without touching the physical network itself, because that could have a much broader impact. So this is why Zero Trust 207 is incredibly important. And in fact, we're working with Dept being their Zero Trust reference architecture, really focusing on the data center and cloud environments, really thinking about how to compartmentalize these networks that were uncompartmentalized in the data center in the unclass region of the infrastructure.
Really, yeah, and sort of putting all these correct sort of barriers, if you will, virtual barriers in place to, again, protect that blast zone, et cetera. One of the tenets certainly of a zero architecture. All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.